Good morning and welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister. You're here for the usual press briefing. So today's press briefing, if I don't chew up my words, this is for November 11th. My name is Tiska Pradham-Brister. I'm the Media and Public Relations Specialist here in the Office of the Prime Minister. I'd like to warmly welcome you all, members of the press. Our Press Secretary, Clint Watson, is back on island, and he will be conducting the briefing this morning. And of course, we have, again, the Minister of National Security, Mr. Wayne Monroe. Clint, of course, will give us a brief update on all the exciting things that happened at COP26 last week. He'll also speak briefly on board appointments as well as some of the public service promotions. So, Mr. Watson, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiska, and good morning, colleagues, and to all of you who are joining us and tuning in to our fourth briefing. We're so happy to be back together after traveling with the delegation from the Bahamas to Glasgow, Scotland, to be back with you to give you a number of updates. I'm going to reserve my updates for after the minister because I know there are some pressing issues we'd like him to address first, and then I'll come back with updates. And then, of course, we'll take your additional questions and answers. And then, of course, we have a special announcement that I think that my colleagues who are present today will be quite happy to find out about. So without further ado, I know last week he was here doing the press briefing to talk about some issues. Since then, there have been new developments in some other areas that we want the minister to address, particularly when we talk about Marco's Law, particularly when we talk about Sexual Offenders Registry. And we believe this is important to have him come back and clarify, explain, give additional information to all of you regarding that. So welcome again, and we'll begin with the Minister of National Security, Mr. Wayne Monroe. Of course, we're going to sanitize as we do every time to make sure that we follow all of the protocols. I'll tell you more about that a little later, too.
All right, thank you, Clint. Hopefully this doesn't become too regular a fixture. Don't know how to take it. But as Clint would have indicated, since I was here last, there were some matters that attracted public attention, and so I've been asked to address those. And I intend to address three matters in particular. Firstly, the Sexual Offenders Register. Secondly, the Marco's Alert System. And then lastly, the circumstance with young Bella, that persons may see some connectivity. The Sexual Offenders Register. It came as a surprise to me that persons who would have looked at it sensibly, soberly, would have done any research about sexual registers in other countries, would have had alarm or concern about anyone questioning the efficacy of them, as countries who have implemented them for years not only question their efficacy, but have updated steps to strengthen them. The specifics on the Sexual Offenders Registry in the Bahamas is that the act was passed. It was brought into force by an appointed day notice on the 27th of July 2019. There was money paid for the electronic registration system and for kiosk machines for biometric reporting of sexual offenders. To date, there is one person on the register who has been released, I'm advised, and there are other persons who are in the prison who have been put on the system. Now, the thinking, I suppose, is that the scheme of our provision is that the Minister of National Security is supposed to notify or determine how to notify the public on the release of a sexual offender. And so that notification can be generally to everybody or to specific persons, and you remain on the register for 10 years unless you go successfully to a judge to be removed. Now, to be quite plain, I, for the big part of my career, successfully sued the government. A part of the justification for my appointment by the Prime Minister was just that. And it doesn't take much reflection to understand his thinking. As a lawyer, before I present a case in court, I think about everything my opponent will do to defeat me, and I move to neutralize them. In this job as Minister of National Security, I will consider everything somebody can do to derail any efforts we take, and we will definitely guard against it. And so, the public will be educated about the Sexual Offenders Register once it is aggressively launched, and the public will be told, for instance, if you hound somebody who is on the register and is notified, that has proven a good reason the judges remove people from the register. And so, as a people, we have to be more vigilant about what we are doing. We have to be more considered, because people will seek to vindicate rights. And so we will seek to educate the public on exactly what the provisions of the register permits, how safe you should feel because somebody is on the register that you know about. And you may find that the launching of the register gives no comfort for you to let down your guard. As Bahamians, when we travel to the US, we watch our children very closely, don't we? We do that because we don't feel safe letting them out of our sight in the US. We will let the public know exactly how safe these provisions can make them. We will not want anyone to let down their guard unnecessarily or unwarrantedly. And so parental responsibility will not be abrogated by the Sexual Offenders Register. You will be told as the public exactly what you can expect of it. And I had a briefing by Dr. Rochelle Lightbourne, who is the director. She indicates that they are ready to go, subject to some manpower and resource issues that I intend to address speedily within the scope of next week. The issue also is that this law has been enforced from 2019. Persons have been released since 2019 that are not on the register, that do not have the reporting requirements that the register permit. So having brought the law into place on the 27th of July 2019, the previous administration did nothing to notify the public in accordance with the Act. I will be considering, together with the Office of the Attorney General, what ability we have to deal with the persons who would have been released from the 27th of July 2019 to date, to address that breach of duty by the previous administration. I hope to be able to report next week, towards the end of next week, that we have fully addressed those issues and moving forward the program for public education about the register. On Marco's alert, this was a project that, in my understanding, was very long in the making. I'm advised that the billboards are up. I think you can see them when you drive around. I'm advised and directed that there's also to be an automated notification to cellular phones. I am distressed to advise that we have 2 telephone companies in this country that provide mobile service, namely Alive and BTC. The system of a Marcos alert will be tested over the Alive system on the 15th of November, which is Monday. But BTC has completely and utterly dropped the ball. They do not have the ability for the alerts to be sent out over their system. If they do not remedy it, it will certainly be my suggestion that anybody who wants to participate in Marco's alert will have to make a choice as to their mobile phone provider. I would challenge BTC not to cause me to tell people to port over to Alive in order to make Marco's alert work. They have had sufficient time. I don't intend to be patient with them. On the young Bella, this has been a distressing occasion nationally. What has been personally distressing to me is, one, the nature in which we pick up information that is incorrect and spread it. What is most troubling to me is the pushback when correct information is given, that somehow some people believe or seem to think that our sense of outrage should be any less because a child who was subjected to great violence was not also sexually abused. That is a sick mindset that we really need to get out of this country, because somehow, in my judgment, it undervalues physical abuse of children. The physical abuse of children is as reprehensible as the sexual abuse of children. You shouldn't do either of them. And the fact that some members of the public seem to think that without the sexual abuse, this is any less an outrageous incident is personally disturbing to me. It tells me that somehow those people are undervaluing the outrage that we should have for the physical abuse of anybody, much less a young child. I would just encourage people to start to think very carefully about how they're evaluating things. Those are the three matters that I was asked to specifically address, and so I would invite questions on those or any other matters that are of interest.
Minister, you indicated that officials are ready to go when it comes to the sexual offenders register. Can we get more of a specific timeline on when we can see it fully implemented?
Well, there's been one person released who is being tracked and is being compliant with tracking in terms of the obligation is to notify of your primary residence and your secondary residence. You don't have to advise as to your movements. So if you go on vacation but don't change your residence, you don't have to advise on that. The rolling out of what we presently have, as I indicated, I would be reporting fully at the end of next week, because there's a need for some staff, physical people if you're processing folks. I will also be advising, if you talk about the full rollout, in my view, when you bring an act of parliament into force, which happened in July of 2019, you also have to take the necessary legal steps as the government to comply with it. And so when you trumpet to the Bahamian public that we've brought this law into effect, supposedly making us feel safer, then you better start complying with it. And that was not done for 2 years. And so whether we can now remedy that and get the persons who were released, who was subject to being on the register from July of 2019 to today, is something I also hope to have some word on towards the end of next week. It will prove a logistical problem now because persons would have been released. We will have to find them if we can get them on the register to get them to report as they need to report. As minister, I will have to determine in consultation with the director and the commissioner of the correctional institution who should be notified and to what extent. It is unfortunate that the law that the previous administration brought into force 2 years ago was not acted upon actively by them.
Piggybacking off of Krishna's question, what about Marco's alert? I know you said there's a test on Monday for Alive and that BTC would have dropped the ball and you're not being patient with them, but when do you expect to be able to fully implement or roll out the Marco's alert?
Well, we have the billboards up. The test will test the ability to broadcast over the cellular system the fact of a child abduction. If you ask me, I would hope we never have to bring it. I would hope we never have to use it because we will only use it. It's designed to be used when people do bad things. But it is useful to have it if that happens. As I say, the test over the Alive system will happen on Monday. That will be a test to selected Alive customers. And then there will be a test to their entire system after that. As I say, I will not be patient with BTC. They've had a long time to get this done. Alive was able to get it done. I'm not interested in any commercial arguments they might have. I can tell them they had better get it done, or their commercial argument will be get it done, or I will personally be telling people to port over to Alive so the system can work across the entire cell network. So BTC can take it, that they have a limited time to cooperate with the technical team from my ministry who is working to get this done.
What would you say to critics who say that you previously represented a sexual offender, so you wouldn't put, I guess, the necessary effort into the sex offenders registry that somebody else would have?
I would say that's an incredibly stupid person. And that would be an incredibly stupid person who would believe that anybody thinks they're immune to crime. Somehow that would be a stupid person who would think that I think either of my two daughters, any of my children, are immune to crime. We need to get out of that stupid way of thinking. The one thing that I could tell you is my experience permits me to know exactly how you can attack any piece of legislation. It permits me to be able to know what you have to do to ensure that legislation is bulletproof. We hire hackers to tell us how to safeguard our system from hacking. So this concept that somebody who has no clue whatsoever about how you attack a city can defend the city is just foolish. And I would simply call that an incredibly stupid person.
Minister, are you able to give any more details about what the findings of Bella's autopsy was? I see the commissioner tweeted yesterday that she had 8 broken ribs.
It is unpleasant, as I had said in the House of Assembly. I have the misfortune of being provided with information that tells me that we have some truly troubling things happening in this country that really shouldn't happen, that should cause us to examine ourselves as a people, and that should cause us to take steps to correct the socialization, the impulse control mechanisms that we inculcate into people that causes them to do much of what we see happening. We need to own up to this. When this happens, it is because as a society, we have let things slip to the point that you have more and more people who are willing to do these types of things. And we have to understand that we have to stop it early, or it will be like a snowball rolling downhill and get larger and larger and larger. From the autopsy, the young child was subject to blunt force trauma sufficient to break ribs that punctured internal organs and caused massive bleeding. Why we have to have the indignity of a sexual assault combined with that for us to be outraged is what makes me truly upset with Bahamian people who it's almost as if they desired that she undergo that indignity as well. And so that is violence against a child.
Did the autopsy indicate whether these were recent injuries or if there were signs that some previous abuse had taken place that have resulted in fractures in the past?
Without exercising some care, because the matter will be headed to a judicial body, there was some indication of previous injuries.
Minister, this incident has also reignited the call for the death penalty among Bahamians. And yesterday in the House, I think it was Michael Clint who said maybe it's time for parliamentarians to get together and I guess flesh out exactly what the worst of the worst is. Where do you and the Davis administration stand with carrying out the death penalty?
As far as I'm aware, the Davis-Cooper administration's position is to enforce all laws that are on the books. The thing that people will simply say, oh, I did murder cases. Yes, so I know how you can attack something. All of the skills that I use to question and to challenge laws will now be channeled into how you do things properly. Because it's pointless, as we have seen, to get somebody sentenced to death in the Supreme Court, be the subject of it being overturned by the Bahamas Court of Appeal, or being overturned by the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. So if those silly people who don't want people who have experience of the areas to be involved now in guarding against it would have their way, you would have people who would put laws in place that are never gonna stand an appellate process. As a people, we have to understand that we're a country of laws, and when we design our laws, we have to design them so they stand up. So when you get somebody sentenced to death, they remain sentenced to death. I have my views on how that can be done. I certainly will be sharing them with my colleagues. I have spoken about it publicly. I have always gone on the record as supporting the death penalty, but not for any deterrent reasons whatsoever. And so we will see what we can do about it. I'm happy to hear Mr. Pintard say that they would cooperate. Be interesting to see if they actually do, because a promise is a comfort to a fool.
Minister, the family of baby Bella's calls for something called Bella's Law, and there's also been calls for changes to the Child Protection Act. Is this something that you, as a parliamentarian, would push for moving forward, whether that be stiffer penalties for perpetrators or just finding ways to protect children, whatever that may be, from the standpoint of legislation? Is that something you would push for?
Well, I would wish to hear what is suggested. The penalty for murder in this country is still death, potentially. I don't know that you could get a stiffer penalty than that. And so I don't believe in knee-jerk reactions. If you want something to change, what you would do is you would articulate, we think there is this weakness. So we think the penalty for killing a child is not sufficiently severe. And then the answer will be, well, the penalty, if it's an appropriate case, is death. How more severe a penalty would you like? The penalty for grievous harm is something in the order of 20 plus years in prison. And so rather than have knee-jerk emotional responses as a people, we need to sit down examine what the law is, and proceed from there. No amount of law is going to stop people doing evil things unless we start to socialize them not to do it. You go to jail for a very long time for things that people still do. We cannot pass the buck to the court system. We have to contend with the fact that we are creating these criminals. We are socializing them. We can't abdicate our responsibility to somebody else.
We'll take one more question if there's one more. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, this is shifting gears if that's okay. Is there a status, or what's the status of the investigation into complaints filed against Superintendent Deborah Thompson, who admitted to joint meetings in the Shane Gibson trial a few years ago? Is an update of that investigation?
Well, that wouldn't be a matter that would come before me. If a complaint has been made and there's a police officer investigating it, that would be for them. I don't get involved in policing at that level.
Thank you, Minister. Minister of National Security, Wayne Monroe, and you can see why Prime Minister Davis has full confidence in the minister to carry out his duties. And of course, as he would have said, he's worked on the other side. He knows the loopholes, he knows the challenges, and so he's now working for the government to ensure that those don't constitute into injustice. And I think we enjoy the full confidence that the minister is very serious about that, and I thank him for coming this morning to share on those matters. Okay, so let's get to some other announcements that, on behalf of Prime Minister, that you need to know, that you need to have this week, and then we'll take some questions and answers. I think it's important to begin, first of all, in giving you more information on COP26. If you notice, as an administration, there is a considerable focus on this, on climate change, because of how important it is for us. I mean, how do you reword saying that if we don't do something about climate change, the islands of the Bahamas can be swallowed up? There is no other way to put that. That if we don't do something about climate change, we can all become refugees of our own country and have to look to other people for help. There's no other way to say that. And that's why this administration is focusing so heavily on climate change and putting in place ways to mitigate and work against climate change and to be able to address matters that contribute to the things that cause us to have stronger storms and greater floodings that we have every day that we call it strange weather, but it really is the result of climate change. And that's why this conference, COP26, is so important. Our delegation, as I said, has been at COP26 all week, doing all of the groundwork and meetings with people. What you would have seen last week was just the opening and the ceremonial part with the world leaders. And once they would have left, they left behind technical groups and crews to begin work and the framework and the negotiations. As delegates draw close to wrapping up COP26, here are some of the things they've agreed on so far, which I think is important. There's a major pledge that saw 190 countries, banks, and organizations agreeing to phase out coal power and end support for new coal power plants, with the coal stalwarts including Vietnam, Poland, and Indonesia on the list. However, one big problem, obviously, is that the agreement was non-binding, while another was the absence of major coal users and miners, Australia, India, the US, and China. Furthermore, on closer inspection, it transpired that what the countries had signed up to was very loosely defined, so there needs to be greater teeth put into this comb. When it comes to deforestation, more than 100 world leaders have promised to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. But the latest pledge is being backed with almost 14 billion pounds of public and private funds, which would make a big difference. When it comes to climate finance, the poorest countries are least responsible for climate change, as you know, and in many cases on the front line of the damage it is causing, while being least financially equipped to deal with it. So the richer nations have pledged to give them $100 billion a year between 2020 and 2050. Although annual contributions are slightly below that, they admitted last month they are not due to hit 100 billion pounds until around 2023, in about 2 years' time. Also, it's important for you to know, following up on the Prime Minister's desire to advance the issue of oceans in the global dialogue, the Bahamas being the only nation in the Caribbean with the largest expanse of coastal and marine areas, has aligned itself with the position papers on oceans as put forward by Fiji and the United States. These are two positions which support the need to countries to continue to strengthen ocean climate action. That's very big for us. In the Bahamas, we can attest to the fact that greenhouse gas emissions are having profound effects on the ocean, with a cascade of threats to our local fishing communities and the livelihoods of Bahamians in general. At the same time, the ocean is a source of sustainable climate solutions that can improve climate resilience and help keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal within reach. Secondly, additionally, for over 3 decades, small island developing states have been calling for the formulation of vulnerability indices that reflect their ecological fragility and economic vulnerability. This has been a major issue for the Bahamas, the perception that we are too rich to get help. The Secretary General recommended that a high-level expert panel be tasked with finalizing the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, MVI, which will help to define the true vulnerability of the countries. And we are proud to announce that our very own Dr. Adele Thomas of the University of the Bahamas spoke on this subject as part of a panel and will be working with other experts on the determination of these programs and how they will be implemented, of subject matter experts on matching vulnerability and access. And next steps on implementation of the MVI, which will greatly be unlocking much needed finances for the Bahamas. Let me pause right there. That is a major breakthrough. You've heard us talk over and repeatedly. The challenge we have with accessing funding for the Bahamas is we're considered too rich. And now we've been able to make breakthrough in having another formula to determine the vulnerability of countries like the Bahamas so that we now will be able to qualify for funding. And we have a Bahamian who will be at that table. Additionally, we held our first COP side event in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, which had hundreds of virtual attendees and was well received by the national and international communities. We invite the press, of course, to watch the side event on YouTube. It's titled Hurricane Dorian / Analysis to Action, Mobilizing Nature-Based Solutions and Partnership for Resilience. So we invite you to go and view it and see the success we've had with telling our story about Dorian and the reaction that we've gotten from it. The team will be returning this weekend from Scotland, and of course we'll have further updates from them on success stories coming out of their negotiations for the past 2 weeks. Congratulations to the Ministry of Environment and all the technical experts who have been there on the ground, working tirelessly day and night to ensure that this is not just a talking heads conference, but we actually come away with action, and we are doing just that. So that's an update on COP. We'll have more, of course, when the team returns, and they'll have more good news, I'm told, for us based on their latter negotiations before leaving Scotland. I want to move on to another area, board appointments. People have been asking what's going on with board appointments. It's been a long and detailed process, as you know. But board appointments are practically complete. Prime Minister says they're just about wrapped up. They will be published and gazetted next week. So all of those, you can look forward to having those out. Many of the boards are now taking office. Many of the chairpersons are now taking office and are now assuming their responsibilities. But you can expect a full list to be published and gazetted next week as we begin now to put the full administration in place to continue governing in a new day environment. I want to give you an update on new bills going before Parliament. Yesterday, as promised, the VAT bill was tabled. Debate will begin on Monday as part of the supplementary budget. The Davis administration is committed to its promise of providing relief to Bahamians. This, along with increase in pension increments and a long overdue promotions, will help scores of Bahamians to weather the economic storm. The administration has also dealt with the merchant shipping bill, as you're aware, as part of the commitment to shore up the maritime sector, which is proving to be very strong and very lucrative. And so we're putting in place bills that matter, and that will translate into success for the Bahamian people. So, of course, debate begins on Monday with the VAT bill, and we hope to pass that because that in the long term will have phenomenal impacts successfully and positively on the lives of Bahamians. Prime Minister is speaking at a maritime gala in Florida this weekend. So just by way of announcement, he will leave on Friday. The Friday night, Prime Minister Davis will deliver the keynote address at the 2021 Anchor Awards in Fort Lauderdale. The awards brings together the who's who in maritime. The Bahamas, as you know, has a rapidly growing maritime sector and is considered one of the world's leaders. We're 7th, actually. That's a big deal for us. To be exact, in global maritime registries. The Prime Minister is expected to talk about our Maritime Academy, future development goals, and the focus to expand this industry. So look out for more information on that. That takes place this weekend. On another matter, we had a courtesy call this week with BTC executives and Cable and Wireless Company this week. Prime Minister Davis met with those executives of both the parent company and BTC. The meeting was to formally introduce the leaders of the organization to the new administration. BTC CEO Andre Foster provided a detailed review of the company's position and matters presently under review. The leaders also presented its plan to the Prime Minister regarding plans for upgrades, new products, and full fiber network. Also under discussion, the company's financial position, when dividends could be declared, as none has been done as yet, and we're being told that it possibly could happen by the end of the year. Restructuring, outstanding issues in the Memorandum of Understanding the Prime Minister would like to see addressed. The pension fund, staffing and headquartering. Many people have seen the JFK headquarters abandoned during the COVID-19 pandemic and have questioned about that. Prime Minister Davis also committed to ensuring the new members of the board that represents the government's interests will be disclosed to them this week with regard to BTC. So you'll be expecting to hear more on that as talks begin to happen. Public service promotions. Significant progress is being made with regard to the backlog on public service promotions. Just this week, scores of immigration officers, as I'm sure you're aware, after 4 years of sitting on the former minister's desk, were now approved by this administration, and those officers were pinned on Monday. Prime Minister was there for that as well. State Minister for the Public Service, Pia Global Role, is just getting started. She is very committed to this task. She says they're looking at all departments across the service at any promotions that were due. They're reviewing all of them. After promotions and bringing those current, they're now looking at regularization. Once they would have finished the exercise of promotions, they will now move into the exercise of regularization, confirming staff and making them permanent and pensionable. They're looking at an exercise from 2006 moving backwards. That's the frame that you can expect to be under review. People who do not have adverse reports but functioning in their posts will be considered. A third process would be to the confirmation of people enrolled in special programs. That will be a separate exercise to make them permanent and pensionable. New hires coming into the system are also being reviewed to be made permanent and pensionable with a contributory pension scheme. And that's important. That is for the new hires from a certain date, where they will now contribute to the pension scheme. As you know, before government was doing it, it's become a serious financial burden. So going forward for new hires, it'll be a contributory pension a scheme that will be introduced to them. Discussions surrounding that, of course, will take place with unions before anything is done, and an analysis is also being conducted surrounding this process before it actually moves to actually being something that can be done. So full discussions will take place, and we commend the Minister of State for Public Service, Pia Global Role, who is very serious about ensuring that those who have labored hard in the service are being adequately and receiving their reward, and not having to wait and become frustrated about it. All right, I want to move on to the emergency orders. As you know, they expire on Saturday. What does that mean? Because people want to know, okay, I'm hearing the emergency orders expire on Saturday. What does that exactly mean? Well, let's give some context to it. The emergency order is a proclamation for emergency, meaning a mechanism to manage the pandemic and impact civil liberties, how you can move about. That's basically what the emergency order is all about. However, with legislation, though, we can manage this. And that's why the emergency orders, the emergency state of emergency is falling away, because we're going to now use legislation to manage how we handle the pandemic. We are controlling the pandemic with legislation rather than the emergency orders. So Bahamians will now have the control without the restriction on civil liberties. Now, the issues of lockdowns, curfews, all of those were impacted by the emergency orders. Those will fall away. The minister, along with the health team, will put rules like wearing masks, how to congregate in public places, traveling, sanitizing, monitoring our borders. For example, requirements for those entering our borders, what's required for you. What the minister said to me is that he believes a lot of the cases, science has shown, the data has shown, that a lot of the cases are through travel, whether it's our people going out and coming back in or people coming through. So we now have rules for when that will work and how that will work and how that will be governed. He believes it will be quite easy with the team to monitor this, and we believe that this will be a better mechanism to use rather than the state of emergency, which should come to an end and should be followed by legislation that is used to govern how we do. So it doesn't mean it's a free-for-all, no. There will still be the requirements in place, like wearing your mask, protocols for events. The same things that you would have seen in a state of emergency will now continue through legislation and put in place, which means those who choose to violate, there will be consequences for those who violate the rules and laws. So it's not a free-for-all, but what it will do is give you back your civil liberties, eliminating the curfews, eliminating lockdowns, and putting in place laws to govern ourselves until we get out of this pandemic. That begins on Saturday. Okay, I think that's all of my announcements and pronouncements from the government. We can begin with some questions and answers, and then we'll hopefully be able to get out of here on time. We'll keep it to our 1 hour as promised. So let's begin with Jasper Ward in the Nassau Guardian. Hi, Jasper. I think, did you get your questions answered? Yes or no? No? Go ahead. You have more? Go ahead.
I have more. One of the questions I asked last week that was not answered, the previous administration pledged to disclose the travel costs of cabinet ministers. It never did. Will the Davis administration reveal how much the previous administration spent on travel? And will it also commit to reveal how much it spent on international travel?
All right. Just as you know, well, through our annual budget, the government of the Bahamas reveals a total allocation of spending in a special fiscal period on travel. That's going to be listed. We will remain consistent in publishing the total allocation towards government, domestic, and international travel in the annual published budget. So you'll see that, and it's going to be identified as travel. So you'll be able to see the amount that's being published there. As far as what the previous administration would have done, this template would have been in place there. So all you have to do is go back to that report, and there will be a line item for government travel, and you will be able to see the amount listed there. And we will continue that practice of making it public in our budget reports that are published.
So you will not reveal the cost of specific trips?
I think maybe people want to know how much are we spending in total on travel rather than specific trips. If it warrants that, I don't see why we have an issue not telling people. I think it's important for people to know, though, that what we are the bigger picture of the travel is what is your annual amount, what is outrageous, and what is a part of operating a government, and those will be made available to you. But the important thing is it's there, it's a line item, rather than saying, oh, this trip to this particular conference costs X, Y, Z, unless there's some abnormality. And we have no problem addressing that if that ever arises.
When can we expect to see some movement on the enactment of the Freedom of Information?
We're moving ahead with the Freedom of Information. First of all, I want people to understand that we are moving ahead. That is, as you know, part of the Davis administration, we are very transparent and accountable. And so we want to see that, because not only does that make it more accessible for yourselves and your colleagues, but it also holds the government accountable. And we have no reason to hold that back. A pilot program is being rolled out with 10 government agencies first. And once we see how that holds up and what needs to change or what needs to be tweaked, it'll be rolled out across the public service. But it's going to be rolled out with a pilot program, including 10 government agencies.
Do you have a timeline for that?
We're trying to get one from the commissioner and those who are involved in the Freedom of Information, so that we're able to put a timeline in place as well. A lot of that is happening right now as we speak. They're working on it, and so we'll be able to give you more information on that as soon as they have that. They're moving into new facilities, and other posts have been approved, because of course there were still some technical people that were missing to be able to officially be able to operate. And so we're now putting those persons in place. Once they're put in place, they're going to be able to roll out the pilot program, and then we'll be able to see how this thing works. We'll get a time frame once these additional officers are in place. They'll give us a time frame, and we'll report back to you on that.
And has the government made a decision on whether the Christopher Columbus statue that was vandalized in front of Government House will be repaired or be replaced with something less controversial?
No decision made yet. It is on the agenda for the administration. As you can imagine, there are more pressing items that we're dealing with right now that we're trying to get off the table at cabinet so that things can happen a little quicker than they're happening now. It is on the agenda, but no decision has been made as far as what will happen yet, but it is on the agenda. Okay, let's move to, thank you Jasper for that. Bethany McDermott, our news.
I have a question related to the emergency orders that you just spoke about. I know under the emergency orders it made way for those hotel workers that were furloughed, well, to be furloughed. Once that ends, what's going to happen with those? Has any discussions happened in that regard, considering Saturday's 2 days from now?
Yeah. Good question, because you're very correct. People were being furloughed under the emergency orders. Now, here's what has to happen, right? Obviously, there needs to be a conversation as to will these persons be re-engaged? And if not, then what needs to happen next as far as proper packages for disengagement, right? The administration has met with a major employer who did express the need to disengage, and we've told them that they had to follow the laws, not the emergency orders, the laws as far as payouts and as far as how it should be done. And they've agreed to follow that. And so that is our position with other companies. It's one thing to say you have people on furlough, but there ought to be at some point an ending point. You just can't have people just waiting and saying, we'll see what happens. There are a lot less people on furlough than there were when we were in the height of this pandemic. And so the ones that are on furlough, we have been talking with those employers to ensure that a decision is made, right? Because it has to be made. So people know whether or not they're going to be re-engaged, whether or not they're going to have to move on, and if so, give them their package, what is rightfully due according to labor laws in this country. So we are very much mindful of that. The Department of Labor is very aware of that and is having that conversation to ensure the law is followed in regards to persons who are furloughed. All right. Let's move to Tribune. Christopher Russell.
Morning, Clint. Were we ever able to come up with a cost for the opening of Parliament at Bahamas and the related events that happened?
We've been waiting on that. We've not gotten that as yet. As you know, that was done independently by a committee that was appointed prior to us, actually. And so we're still waiting on that. We've asked. I've been asking. I've been your advocate. I've been calling weekly to get this figure. They were still waiting on a number of outstanding invoices and so forth. So we're still waiting on that. So that's very much on my parking lot to get to you.
Okay. And also, has the Davis administration been able to get a handle of what the emergency spending under the previous administration looks like when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, it's something that we are checking into as well. There was no defined, how do I put this? There was no defined amount, and so what it requires is us having our financial experts to go and look through and identify what was done under emergency spending, what was done as far as the food security program, and who those vendors are. And so we have engaged that already. We've spoken to the financial secretary, who has said that he has a team who will begin to look through to identify these amounts so that we can get a handle on it. Because of course, you know, that's very important to the Davis administration. It's a question that was asked when the administration would have been in opposition. It would have been who were these vendors, what was spent to them. And so that's something we've asked finance to take a look at and to give us an answer on once they would have completed that review. We're told that a full review, according to the financial secretary, is being done, and a report will be made available on the emergency spending during the pandemic. All right, that's it. Let's go to Eyewitness News, Francesca Brown.
Hi, my questions are asked and answered, but I just have a quick follow-up, I guess, clarification. When the emergency orders expire on Saturday, even though the health bill is taking over, there would be no curfew?
Correct.
No curfew.
It's hard to believe it.
No, I'm just clarifying because, you know,
No.
there was no mention of the curfew in it, so people just want to be clear. As of Saturday or as of Sunday, there will be no curfew?
Well, it comes into play on Saturday, is when it expires. Saturday the 13th when it expires. So at midnight on Saturday night, going into Sunday morning, the curfew will fall away, and we will be governed by laws that we have in place. So you'll be able to leave much earlier for church on Sunday morning, Sandy.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yes, we get to church early on Sunday. Let's go to Carla Palmer, ZNS.
Some boards are paying and some boards are not, right?
Yes. Your question was some boards are paying and some are
Some
not.
boards are paying and some are not.
Yes, some boards have stipends and some
I
don't.
don't know, what's that estimated amount, and I wonder how much did the previous government spend?
For boards. We can get that figure for you. I know the previous administration increased the boards to 140 boards, which is a lot of boards. So we can get that figure as to what boards' financials are. So our communications people, make sure we make a note of that so we can get that answer for you for next week.
Okay, the cabinet building ran down. I don't know if, but is there a blueprint for another?
For the cabinet office,
Yeah.
there is. We're told there is a blueprint for construction for a new cabinet office. That's all we know at this point. We'll find out from the Secretary of the Cabinet what exactly these plans are and what is going on there. But I have seen the structure. But as you know, would have known, according to the Minister Rouser, we don't just go off sketches. We need to see plans. So that's something obviously the Secretary of the Cabinet will oversee. And we'll get found out for you in that regard. Okay, Leah Cooper, JCN.
Hi, is there any consideration, well, I know that the government is in talks with extending the Pfizer vaccine to those 5 years old. I was wondering, though, where does that leave the children in the children's homes?
Mhm.
Is there any consideration for them?
Children in wards of the state. Yeah, good question there. And it's a topic of broad conversation. I'm advised that the Ministry of Health and Wellness and Social Services together will meet to determine the way forward on that. And I understand they're setting a date to meet, both ministries, to determine what is the best course of action on that. But it's a very good question. So we'll get back to you once we have an answer from them regarding that. Yeah. Yes, Justin.
A little follow-up. I think it was Christian who asked about the furlough. Can you say, is there an estimate as to how many people are currently furloughed in the Bahamas?
We don't know that. We're going to find out, particularly when the emergency orders expire. We need to know who's out there. Most of the people were from the major agencies, the hotels that were being furloughed. Very few were from private sector companies, or most people either just disengaged, put them on third pay or something of the sort, or brought them back to work. So it's not a whole huge amount what we would have seen prior pandemic or in the pandemic, the heart of the pandemic. It's a very few people. And of course, one of the major hotel resorts, like I said, did go to a disengagement exercise for those who were furloughed. So it should not be a large number, let's put it that way. But we will get back to you on exactly how many people are being furloughed. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all of our information today. One final thing that I wanted to address, and I believe it's in keeping, I know it's in keeping with the Davis Cooper administration to focus on small businesses. We want to introduce a new feature that we will have from time to time, particularly to the delight of the media at these press conferences, and it's called Spotlight on Bahamian Food Businesses. We'll put that up for you. And what it really is that we want to encourage and highlight Bahamian entrepreneurs in the food industry. So, on a regular basis, we will feature a different food business who provide tasty treats at the end of our press conferences, and hopefully you will highlight them in your mediums and your forums, whether you tweet it or whether you do a little quick interview or show some video, so that we highlight every week a different Bahamian food business that's making strides and doing an outstanding job. We're going to kick that off today with a food venture called Wicked Wings. I think the owner is here. Where are you? Nat is not here. Come on, Nat. Let's introduce yourself to the people. For some Wicked Wings today. Come on up, Nat. And this is the entrepreneur of Wicked Wings. And Nat, I'm going to allow you to say a few words about your business. Come on up. And tell them a little bit about Wicked Wings. Go ahead.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, Bahamas. Wicked Wings is definitely a product of the pandemic. As a lot of other businesses that have been out there just hustling, trying to make a dollar. Definitely, God has been good and allowed our experiment. That was something just to make a few dollars. During the lockdowns, is now booming and doing very well. So we would like to thank all of our customers that have supported us this time, to continue to support those who don't know about us yet. Don't worry, you're gonna know. We got the wickedest wings in town. We have 9 different flavors that we have for you to choose from, along with our famous stuffed mushrooms, our crazy corn, and a plethora of other things definitely that you can have. Everything is Bahamian based, even the names of the flavors, like Biggity Barbecue and Tar Baby. Trust me, everything is Bahamian. All the sauces and everything are made from scratch and made from the things that come out of the yard, like the bush medicine. So please, we thank you, and we appreciate even this opportunity to speak. Thank you, Clint. And Bahamas, 565-2885. Go ahead and give that a call today or WhatsApp us. Thank you. Check us out on Facebook and also Instagram. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nat. And so, without further ado, I'm going to allow my colleagues to go and partake of that beautiful wicked wings on the outside. Thank you for being a part of this week's presser. Any questions you need, please call us. We're here to provide what information you need. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Bahamas.